Hi there, guys. Welcome back to the second installment of the deep dive into the industry. Today, I'm joined by Jennifer Keegan, who is Director of Building Science over at GAF.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here.
No worries at all. I was really keen to reach out and have you on one of our sessions as a key person and a key leader in the industry. So first of all, I guess let's start with a little bit about yourself. Tell me about your background and I guess your experience and how you got into the field.
Okay. So I always thought I wanted to be an architect. So I went to school for architecture, but being good in math and science, I was pushed to check out engineering and thought I'd take courses in both and then pick. But, first child, typical overachiever. And so I got both degrees. And then I graduated and went, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because I don't really want a job in either one of these fields. And fortunately, I found an interview at a forensic company, and I was out on a job site. I was up on a roof, and I was like, wow, live time problem solving. This is where it's at. And it was kind of this crash between my visions of what both careers could have been. And so I got really lucky and just kind of fell into the building enclosures.
Yeah, no, I think as most people tend to do, really, it's always been interesting and intriguing to me how there are very little courses that specialize in building enclosures, and none basically.
No, it was on the job learning.
Yeah, very much so. What would you think? What would you say would have been the hardest part of the on the job learning, just out of interest?
I'm sorry, the hardest part of what?
The on the job learning with it,
Oh gosh, the hardest part? I think initially is it kind of rocks your confidence.
Yeah,
so you go out on a project and you don't know what you're looking at, and you don't even know the questions to ask sometimes. So I was very fortunate to have some really amazing mentors who took me under their wing, and I think they knew I didn't know anything, because how could you know something? So them just giving me that opportunity to learn and figure it all out and have that space to ask questions and not be expected to know everything up front.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's great. And as you mentioned, it's that on-the-job problem solving where so many people get into engineering in the first place, or architecture in the first place, to problem solve. So what, as you said, a unique and fantastic crossover. I guess once finding your niche, you specialized, I would say, even further within the roofing and waterproofing space. How did you find that niche and that specialism?
And I guess it starts because there wasn't an opportunity I turned down. Any opportunity to learn, get my eyes and my hands on a project, something I hadn't seen before, work with somebody new, and really embrace stepping outside of my comfort zone. And so I just said yes. I said yes to pretty much everything. I took an interest in what somebody else was doing. I caught my wind and got brave enough to start asking questions. And I was fortunate enough to work with, like I said, these amazing colleagues who recognized my interest, and they created opportunities for me to grow. Things from taking a lead on the next project to presenting at the client meeting, participating in some research, or even tagging along to meetings. And that's what resulted in my stepping into my first leadership role at ASTM.
Nice.
The secretary of the waterproofing subcommittee didn't show up that day. And so I was the only woman in the room, and they looked at me and asked me to take notes. And I said, okay, this is an opportunity to get involved. And after the secretary didn't show up for the next meeting, I was asked to step into that role, which then turned into the vice chair, which then turned into the subcommittee chair. So, my experience in consulting from forensics about how enclosures fail and how to repair them, and then transitioning that into a more proactive role, working with new construction design. So that's like the roofs, the walls, fenestration, waterproofing, it all ties together. So I really needed to understand it all and learn from the colleagues who had specialized in that specific element of the enclosure. And it really wasn't until I came to GAF back in 2018 that my focus shifted more specifically towards roofing.
Okay, sure. So it's been more, I guess, specialized in the building enclosure until, I guess, recently.
Yes.
I guess which leads very nicely onto the position, of course, as Director of Building Science and Roof Science over at GAF, which is really interesting. It's a really interesting role. I guess GAF as a company are expanding and doing something they've not done before necessarily. Tell me about the team you're building at GAF. Admittedly, I watch on LinkedIn and I love it. I watch out for the content, and you guys just seem to have loads of fun as well as sort of naturally doing great work. So yeah, tell me about the team you're building and the main aim and focus really.
Thanks. I will say we do have a lot of fun. So the Building and Roofing Science team is a collection of experienced enclosure consultants, architects, and engineers. And we're translating all of our experience to support the design community. So from architects, specifiers, roof consultants, and all of our lessons learned combined with the science behind how building enclosures perform, we share that through educational offerings, industry articles and papers, and through project support. I'd say the most interesting part of working with building enclosures is being able to hear and see the story that the building is trying to tell us.
Wow.
And to understand that the science behind the problem, and then to influence the design so building science prevails. and we get to support design teams as they critically think through these challenges. So we get to be that partner, that trusted advisor. And we do have a ton of fun as we're doing it.
You really do seem to look like you have a whale of a time. Wow, that's so interesting. And so I know you guys are actually quite scattered across the country. Do you guys go out on site still? Is it very much more of a sort of a, working from home as a remote sort of team? How are you guys structured?
So pre-COVID, we were all remote employees. I was in the corporate office, but everybody else worked remotely. But we traveled about 50% of the time. So we would meet up in different locations, and we'd be very intentional about having team time while we were on site. But we meet virtually all the time, and that was pre-COVID. During COVID, obviously, we had to kind of reinvent how we do all of our education, and because it had to be all virtual. And we actually just last week had our first trip, our first in-person live event where it wasn't through screens. We were in a room with 20 people and it was fabulous. So yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. It's similar with us. There's so many people that sort of onboarded or started over the pandemic, and you think, hang on a second, it's been 2 years and we worked together and I absolutely adore you, but I've never seen you, in real life. No, that sounds good. As I said, you guys look like you have a great time and clearly do great work as well, which is awesome. And that my next moving on, I guess, talking about your presence over LinkedIn and you specifically, I would say more than anyone really that I know of in the industry. There are people that champion industry bodies, like you have Scott Hinesley, of course, over at REI, great guy. You've got people scattered everywhere that celebrate and support industry organizations and affiliations. But I think you're an absolute champion of it. So how do you think organizations have celebrated, encouraged, and furthered your career, I guess, in this such a niche specialist field?
I think when you get involved with industries, you never know what doors it's going to open, and you're guaranteed to learn something along the way and make lifelong relationships. So, ASTM was my first industry association engagement, and I was surrounded by men who were older than my dad in a lot of cases.
Sure.
They really took me under their wing, and they showed me the ropes, and they created opportunities for me to grow. And I have had some amazing mentors and had opportunities to work on projects based on my relationships in my industry knowledge. And then I was even recruited actually into this current position I am in today with GAF through ASTM engagement.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
because of my leadership at ASTM and being one of the few technical women in that organization at the time, National Women in Roofing recruited me to join their board. And so I started as the education chair, and then I grew up into the executive board of directors. And through National Women in Roofing, I have met people I would have never crossed paths with, because we're in really different segments of the industry and in different locations. But knowing them gives me this greater perspective and understanding and knowledge, and it adds to the depth of my network and the relationships in the industry.
Yeah.
There's kind of this solidarity with the women at National Women in Roofing, and we want to grow, challenge archaic thoughts and approaches, and become the best versions of ourselves. And so now I'm blessed with these lifelong friendships because of this.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, I think it's so important. I always, looking at the roofing expo that happened the other day, and of course the event, I think it was over in New Orleans, and just the solidarity, I think, that's formed between women in roofing, that is such a niche field for, especially in life anyway, and then there's women in it. I always think of the time, so my grandfather as a roofer, and I grew up literally on the roofs. My job was chief tea holder, but I grew up sort of sitting on roofs and getting into it, and I was always sort of, I remember even from a young age looked at, it's like, oh, there's a girl sitting on the roof, she's on the way up there, and it's such an exciting dynamic in niche field, and it's something I've been passionate about in my work. The amount of women I connect with that have said they have felt uncomfortable on a site, or they felt like they haven't been given the same access to opportunity, is really sad. And so, organisations like National Women in Roofing and people like yourselves who are championing women in the industry is fab. And actually we're seeing more women enter the field, which is so encouraging. I guess, what would you say is your best piece of advice to a woman just starting out in this industry?
So I'd say embrace being part of the 1%. It's the one opportunity we have to be part of the 1%.
Yeah.
Advice that I would give. So enjoy being the underdog. I love the look on someone's face when they realize that my capabilities are legit, whether it's climbing the scaffolding or talking through a detail, debating a technical issue, and the conversation shifts from like this skeptical or sarcasm to, wow, she actually knows what she's talking about.
Yeah.
And then you grab their respect, and that loyalty really, really endures. I have there's a woman in the industry, Lelia Galland, who's become a good friend of mine. And she's one of the people out there that really encourages women to leverage our inherent strengths. And she reminds me that as women, we're traditionally really strong negotiators, but we really have to reframe the way we think about that, because we don't think we're good at negotiating, but reframing that in the terms of business really helps us find ways to be even more successful.
Yeah.
And then, the biggest piece though, is remember that above all, this is a people business, and people work with people they like. So reach out, get involved, ask questions, and that's going to make a huge difference for you.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And thank you for sharing those words of wisdom. It's, as I said, something I'm so passionate about. I think in a week of International Women's Day, right, we can only raise awareness and more support for women in the field, whether they've been in the field for 20 years and are still struggling and feeling like they can't overcome, I guess, that feeling of not being respected, or whether they are just starting out and looking to break in and make a splash. I think it's, those words are really crucial and really important. So yeah, no, thank you so much for jumping on this morning. I think you're fab. I think you're so motivational, and thank you for the work you do in the industry. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
No worries. Thanks, Jennifer. Take care.
Thanks.